Hey there guys, it is December and that means November is over obviously, and it's time to close out my November budget. If you're new here, my name is Amy and this is Beloved Plans, and this channel is for anyone who is looking to get more organized in their finances, their productivity, business, and everyday life. So join with me today as I go through and show you exactly how I close out my budget every month. So the first thing I'm going to do is I am going to flip to my expenses for the month of November. So I have all of my color-coded expenses here from my various accounts, and anytime a page is completed or it's the end of the month, I need to go through and total up every category and write the total of those categories over here on the margin. I'm going to show you guys why I do it that way. They are also written in each paycheck bill tracker under my actuals column. I prefer to do, when I'm adding up the totals for the month, I prefer to do it based on these sheets in case I added incorrectly or something got missed or whatever. I just like to do it based on these. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and then I will be right back. Okay, so now I have totaled up all of the various expenses in the categories that I have throughout my expense tracker. So if I don't have room to write them down here, I just put them on the margin here. So now the next step that I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the monthly budget category breakdown, and this answers the big question, where did my money go? So this is always the sheet that tells me the most about where we spent our money for that month. Every month these vary a little bit because, you know, we do have certain bills that hit quarterly. Like for example, our utilities are going to be a lot higher this month because we had a big water bill that we paid. So the most important thing on here is to go through and add up what you budgeted for each of those categories, because with that water bill, for example, I should have budgeted a lot for it, which I know I did. So that the difference column is really what I like to pay the most attention to. How far off of my budget was I? So the first thing we're going to fill in on this page is the starting balance. To get that number, now if you only do one account that you track your expenses in, you'll just take that starting balance. But I have 3 different accounts that I use in my monthly budgeting. So the first one is I'm going to start with this account, and this had a balance of $41.54, and I'm just going to round the numbers either up or down just to keep it more simple. So $41.54 was my starting balance there in that account. In this joint one, it was $308, so I'm going to add that. And then in our sinking fund account, we started with $53.40. So then that gives us a total of $98.02. So that's my starting balance. So now I'm going to go through and I added up the income on all the different pages, and I'm going to add that together to get my incoming income number. Okay, so my incoming income was $78.29. So I'm going to add those two together, and that gives us $17,631 to work with for the month of November. So now I'm going to do very similar to what I did with this income number. I'm going to go through each of these different categories and add up on all the pages across how much I spent. I like to do the spent first, and then I'll go back and look at the budgeted part, and then I'll calculate the differences. So I'm going to start with debt. Okay, so now that I have my monthly budgeted amount and my monthly spent amount, I'm going to go through and calculate the difference for each of these. If it's under, I'm going to write it in green. If it's over, I'm going to write it in red. So I'm going to get those pens out, and then I'll also calculate the percentage of income. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the amount spent. So for example, for debt, it's 42.29, and then I'm going to divide it by the total monthly income. So this 17,000 number. So divided by 17,631. So that was 24% of our income went to debt. And that's like our mortgage, cars, all of that kind of stuff. All right, so I did go over. Sometimes it's good to go over on things like this. It means you paid more off than you intended to. So I went over by $697. So I'm gonna do that one in red. And like insurance, I didn't go over at all, so I'm gonna put a 0. And then that one is pretty much 0%. It's such a small number of that. Now, the way mine works is it's probably not going to add up to 100% because I did not budget all the dollars of this $17,000. I have some like in our sinking fund that is just sitting there and it hasn't been like assigned anything yet. It hasn't been spent yet. So my numbers are not going to zero out and all balance perfectly, and that's okay. I'm more worried about how much I spend and then how it compares to what I budgeted for the month. All right, so there we have the category breakdown. I always try to have more greens than reds, but I'm really happy actually with how our budget turned out for the month of November. When we did go over, it was always less than $100 over than what I had budgeted for. So that tells me that my budgeting was pretty accurate throughout the month, which was great because we switched to a weekly pay schedule, and so I switched to weekly budgeting paychecks. This is kind of what I'll use for a guide for the month of December also when I'm trying to figure out how much to budget for, especially like the envelope categories. Our food, this seems really low actually for us. We're usually closer to like $1,200. So I'm just trying to figure out like why that was so low, but that's okay. I mean, maybe I can bring our budget down a little bit. I also think restaurants are closed and that whole sort of thing here. So we are not eating out as much as we may have before, because even our eating out was only $100 for the month. So that was a lot lower even than I budgeted for, which is great. So that is how I do the monthly budget category breakdown worksheet. So next I'll go in here again, and there's also the debt payment plan sheet, and I usually fill that out kind of at the beginning of the month, just so I have my balances and everything. So now we'll look at this monthly debt and savings breakdown worksheet. So I'm going to use total monthly income was $17,631, and then the monthly debt payoff, so we paid off $4,229, and the percent of income to debt was, I'm actually just going to be able to use this number, so it's 24%. Okay, so now what we're going to do here is we're going to break down the different debt categories. So that's on the previous page here. Okay, so now I've written in all of our debt categories, and in this column we actually are going to calculate the percentage of category to the debt number, so this number here. So I just took all of these, so like this one was 40 divided by 4,229, and that equals 1%. So I just did that for each of these so I can see how much of the debt category is going to what. So like 57% of that of the debt payments are going to our mortgage, 20% is going to our home equity, 10%, around 10% is going to each of our cars. So that's a nice way to see just kind of where your debt money is going, if it's going to credit cards or mortgage or other debts that you have. So then I did the same thing over here under the savings category. So Acorns is an app that I use that does round up investments. So I contributed $78 to that. I didn't have any other savings in the month of November, so that just is easy to calculate. It comes out to be 100% of the savings category. So then the next thing I like to do after I figure out the debt and savings breakdown is to to do the monthly spending comparison. So this is where you take the prior month's numbers, so this would be October, and then you take the current month's numbers, so November, and you write them all out, and you write out the percentage of the budget for each one, and then you can see how much of a change there has been. So I went ahead and pulled out my October page that was like this. So here's my November one, here's my October one, and then I used the monthly spent and I just copied that down to here, and same for November, monthly spent, copied it onto the spent column. And then again, I already have the percentages calculated, so those were easy to just copy into here too. So this is all just copying over from the monthly budget category breakdown sheet. So then what I did was I went through and calculated the differences, either more or less, or sometimes there was no difference. And this actually gives me the most insight into kind of the direction we went for the month, right? So we actually went in a really good direction, I'm happy to say. I feel like this is the first time in a long time we've done this. We paid $272 more towards debt. We went over on a couple things, but when we did go over, it wasn't by a ton. Like food, it was only by $10. Personal was only by $4. Utilities were up $155, but that's because we had a quarterly water bill in there, so I expected that to happen. Sports was over by $387, but that's because my daughter had volleyball registration, which is like $450. So that makes sense, and that was justified and everything, and I had sinking funds for that. Entertainment was up 25 and miscellaneous was up 22. So those were really the only things that we were up on for the month of November. So that makes me really happy. A lot of the other things we were down. So that also makes me really happy and just shows that we're being smart with our money and we're not overspending in any areas for the month of November. So I will take these numbers then when I do my close out my December budget, and I'll copy them over to the spending comparison worksheet as well as the percentages. So then the last thing that I do is calculate my monthly net worth. So that is on this sheet, and I actually use an app called Personal Capital for this, and it allows me to set up links. It links all of my different accounts that I have and puts in different assets, and it actually shows our net worth. Like I can log in there on any day and see our total net worth. It updates all our 401k balances, just every account we have that can be linked to an online bank will show up in here. So I'm going to go ahead and fill in those numbers using that app, and then I will check back in. All right, so now that I went through and wrote in all of our asset amounts and our liabilities amounts, I went ahead and calculated all of those and then added up, or found the difference rather, and that equals my total net worth. So it's kind of crazy because the last few months it's been going down a little bit just because the market, and we have a lot of investments, the market wasn't doing super awesome. But in November, after the election, it really went up a lot. So we saw a huge 15% increase in our net worth this month. I mean, yes, we did pay off more debt, but most of it came from the increases in our investments and retirement accounts. So that's one thing to note when you're looking at net worth, is just know that it can fluctuate a lot, especially if you are heavy on the investment side, because there's so many factors that go into whether those are up or down. So you kind of just want to focus more on the overall trend and the assets and the liabilities that you can control. So like paying down your debt, putting more into savings, that sort of thing, because the money that's in the markets, you can't control that money as much. So you just have to know that there's a little bit of risk, but with risk can come reward. And as a month like November showed, it can have a really, really nice reward. So yeah, our net worth went up about $38,000 in just 1 month, but it could also easily drop that much the next month. So you just have to remember that when you're calculating your net worth. So that is what I do each month to close out my budget. So now that that's done, what I'll do is I will take it out of my planner. I'm just going to take the whole month out and all the pages, and I'm going to put it into where I keep all of my planner, or my budget pages for the month rather. So I'm going to put that in, and it's November, so my December pages are in my current planner, and I will use those through the end of the month, and then at the end of the month I will put those in here. And then I'm going to do a separate video in January that talks about what I'm going to do with this entire year's worth of budgeting documents, because this is a lot of stuff to store. This is actually the first full year that I've done the budgeting budget mom system, so I have not had to actually do anything with the papers before. So I have an idea based on what she does, but as you can see, I do have the expander discs on there and it is quite large. So I'm excited to tell you guys what I'm going to be doing with that for long-term storage solution and record keeping. So I hope you guys found this video helpful. As I close out my monthly budget, I will try to do another one in December and try to do them each month going forward, because it is really helpful, I know for me personally, to see all that information and to see how the calculations are done. It kind of takes all that little day-to-day stuff of tracking the expenses and everything and puts it together in a bigger picture. So then you can see exactly where your money's going, maybe where you're spending too much or not saving enough, that whole thing. It just really helps me to feel in control of knowing where our money's going. So don't forget to subscribe if you haven't yet subscribed, and give this video a like if you liked it very much. And if you'd like to see how I set up my December budget, go ahead and check out the video over here to the right, and that will take you to my December budget setup. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you guys next time.